and sisters. This is Dr. William Schnoebelen coming to you from With One Accord Ministries with a warning about paganism inside the church and also out there in the culture at large, and what we as believers are supposed to do about it. Now, we've used this passage many times, but it's nonetheless relevant now than it ever is, and that's this prophecy, this thing from the prophet Jeremiah, where in chapter 10, in verse 2, he says, "Learn not the ways of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the heathen are dismayed at them." Okay, now, we understand in a broad context what the Almighty is saying there. We're to stay away from pagan feast days. And yet continually the church down through the centuries seems to have been struggling with this. And let me give you a personal anecdote. When I was going to a fundamental King James only independent Baptist church with what we thought was a really great pastor, and all of that. This was back probably over 20 years ago. And they had a Valentine's Day banquet. And it was supposed to be just this cute thing where all of the men could take their wives out on a date, and there would be dancing, and they had rented a hall. And, you know, on the surface, it sounds okay. But, you know, it bothered me at the time just a little, but I figured, well, you know, the trouble with being an ex-witch is sometimes you think, okay, am I too hypersensitized to these things? Well, sadly, in any event, within just like 3 or 4 days of that banquet, we learned that the pastor of the church had been caught in adultery. And it was devastating, as you can imagine, especially for his family. And I'm not saying, you know, if you celebrate Valentine's Day, you're going to commit adultery. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is when you even have a church that is so strict, you know, because the independent Bible Baptist churches tend to be pretty strict about these things. Although I did have to warn that same pastor a few years earlier about the fact that they were putting up Christmas trees and having a Christmas pageant. So, you know, everybody's got to learn these things one way or another. But I guess my point is that when you're allowing these things from the world into your church and into your personal lives, there's always a danger that you're opening up a door and allowing the evil one to come in. And I also want to say one other thing, because we've had conversations with people over the years about various holidays. Like some people think it's evil to celebrate Thanksgiving. I don't know why, but they do. Other people think it's evil to support the 4th of July. And I heard a brother many years ago make this distinction, which I think is important. There are holidays that are just secular, that they have no religious content to them. For example, the 4th of July or Memorial Day or Labor Day, even though, you know, those days are also often used to commemorate our fallen military. And so there's a lot of prayer and things involved with that, but that's fine. You know, I guess my point is the 4th of July is secular, because it has no underpinnings of religion. And Thanksgiving, which was started by Bible-believing Christians in this world, in the New World, that's perfectly fine. I mean, it's kind of an echo, if you will, of the Feast of Sukkot. And, so I have no problem with that. And, of course, if you don't like my opinion on that, well, that's fine. Everybody needs to follow their conscience. But the problem with Valentine's Day is that it is rooted in a religious festival, even though hardly anybody knows that nowadays. Just like hardly anybody knows all of the creepy stuff. Well, more people know about Halloween, I guess. But still, the thing behind Valentine's Day is profoundly pagan, and it's profoundly scary. Most historians, well, first of all, let me get this out of the way. There really was apparently a Saint Valentine. He was a martyr to the faith of Christ, and we give him all the praise for that. My larger point is that and notice, by the way, I can remember when I was a young person, it was St. Valentine's Day. Somehow or other we've lost the saint. Now it's just Valentine's Day, Happy Valentine's Day, whatever. And I think that's just a reflection of how our culture is just so averse to anything that might smack of being holy or being, a Christian or anything like that. It's just like, stay away from me. They don't want to be reminded of the fact that there are and were saintly people. Tzaddikim, as we say in Hebrew. They don't like that because it makes them deep inside feel guilty because everybody has a conscience. So they've thrown out the saint. It's just Valentine's Day. So most historians agree that it's basically just like so many of these things that came up with the Roman Church. It was tacked on to a major Roman pagan feast called Lupercalia, which is February 15th in their calendar. And so the 14th happened to be the feast day of this saint, and they kind of smushed them together like they like to do. And this Lupercalia thing is basically a celebration of the she-wolf that supposedly, this is mythology, although who knows, about these two brothers, Romulus and Remus, who were supposedly the founders of Rome. Romulus, in fact, you see the word Rome in his name. They were two brothers, and they were, from soon after birth, they were suckled by a she-wolf. And so in celebration of this particular thing, it's kind of like a thing in their history of the city of Rome, they made this holiday, and it was partly designed to promote, sexual excesses, and partly designed to promote if women were having trouble conceiving, that supposedly if they would go to these devotions of Lupercalia, that somehow or other would help them conceive. And, that the problem with it is that number one, it's devoted to this kind of semi-goddess figure of this she-wolf, and number two is that it involved debauchery, it involved orgies, it involved animal sacrifices, it was very bloody, and it was all in this context of sexuality, of hypersexuality, and all of these things. And the other part of it is, and this is all kind of tied together, even today, in, if I may use the word, the iconography of Valentine's Day. There's this idea, and of course back in the day, ancient Rome, they believed there was a god of love named Eros. That was the Greek name of, and the Roman and Greek gods and goddesses are kind of very, very similar, because basically the Romans just stole the entire Greek pantheon and changed their names, and then added some. So in Rome, he was called Cupid. In Greece, he was called Eros. And of course, from the word Eros, we get our word erotic. So tied in with the whole Valentine thing now, and for many, I don't know how many centuries, is this idea of Cupid, who is, flying around with this bow and arrow, boom, firing, arrows into people's, posteriors, and somehow that would make them fall in love. The things these people come up with. But, and he was called the blind bowman. He's even referenced in Romeo and Juliet by Shakespeare as that. The idea being that he had a blindfold on, and that love was just sort of totally random. He would fire an arrow, which he couldn't even see where it was going, and it would land in somebody's, posterior. Then that person would fall in love with some other random person. It was all kind of like just throwing lots or casting dice. It was totally random. And, and these entities, the Eros / Cupid character was the god of lust. And this isn't the kind of thing Christians should be involved in. And I would submit to you that basically the danger is if you get into this stuff and you celebrate it, quote unquote, that you would be opening, because this is like an egregore. And I've talked about this several times, but an egregore is like a thought form that has been around for so many centuries that it has become like a stronghold, and demons come and live in this egregore, if it's a bad egregore, because there can be good egregores too. But, my point is that surrounding this holiday, there are these demons of lust that are related to Eros. And you don't want to let these into your life, whether it's into your marriage, or even, let's just say, you're courting. Let's say you've decided you're thinking about marrying this girl, and so when Valentine's Day comes around, you buy her a big heart-shaped box of chocolates with, a little arrow going through it and all of that. This isn't good, because whether you're dating or whether you're married, it doesn't matter. You're introducing elements of pagan, erotic energy into your marriage, and this is very real, believe me, because these demons, even among, married couples, can cause problems, whether it's with pornography, with masturbation, or even, Yah forbid, with infidelity, with either the man or the woman going out and committing adultery. This is a very real danger that believers have to be conscious of. And so, as you probably gathered, I am advising, don't celebrate Valentine's Day. I mean, if you want to give your honey a box of chocolates, that's great. I would just advise not having it being a big heart-shaped thing with an arrow through it. And I'm going to tell you why in a second. But, take every husbands, take every opportunity in your life that you have to show your wife how special she is. Whether it's flowers, whether it's, of course, candy is not really the healthiest thing in the world to eat, but, once a year or whatever, that's not a big deal. But I guess I would just say, you need to just do it a lot. You don't necessarily have to do it, oh, it's Valentine's Day, I've got to do it, or I'm going to be in the doghouse. So let me just say a couple other things. There's this whole backstory about the idea of this erotic god, Cupid or Eros, who's got a bow and arrow. And a lot of people, and let me say this as a little quick sidebar. With what I'm about to say, let me just say that I don't believe that there's somehow something wrong with being an archer or with being a hunter. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying there's some interesting stuff in the Torah that kind of ties into this. And again, the law of first mention, which is the idea that the first time something is mentioned in the Bible, that's pretty darn significant. And in this case, we have the first time we hear about anybody who's an archer or a hunter, it just happens to be Nimrod. And I think most of you know who Nimrod was, but he's basically the guy that built the Tower of Babel. He was a mighty hunter, and from literally time immemorial, before the time of Messiah, his sign was the sign of the bowman. Why is this the sign of the bowman? Well, because if you're an archer, you got your bow and you take these two fingers and put the arrow in there and you pull it back and thump, off it goes. I am not an archer. I dabbled with it when I was a kid, like most of us, but I'm not claiming to be an expert, and I just know that, you use these two fingers. And this is the sign of the hunter. And wrapped into all of this is the idea, down through the centuries, that when you have these god-goddess figures, right up into the time of witchcraft and Middle Ages in Europe, in Northern Europe, Wicca and all of that. The idea is you've got the goddess and you've got this like Herne the Hunter, Cernunnos, Carnena, all these different, gods of witchcraft are all hunting figures. And again, that's partly rooted in the fact that back then that's basically one of two ways that people could get meat, either by raising it as cattle or by going out and hunting it. But beyond that, there's this idea of the archer, the hunting figure being some sort of sinning, rebellious individual. And you see that carried forward because in Genesis 25:27, we learn that Esau was also a hunter. And that he was known to be a good archer, because back then that's basically how people hunted. And he was very skillful at it. But again, he was kind of the bad son. His other, Isaac's other son, Jacob, was very studious and quiet and all of that. And he was also kind of a stinker at times because he pulled some tricks on his father and on his brother, but still he's regarded down through the history of the Bible as a more virtuous character, because basically Esau went off and married, outlandish women and, went against the wishes of his parents. And of course he ended up fathering what came to be known as Edom, which is one of the enemy nations of Israel. So again, this whole sense of things, and behind the archer, behind the idea of the bow and arrow and the symbology there in the Bible of rebellion, of at the very least, because actually Nimrod, as a lot of you probably know, is basically the great-great-great-grandfather of Masonry and Roman Catholicism. I mean, way back. I mean, he basically founded the first New World Order religion way back at the Tower of Babel. And basically the people of Elohim have been fighting against this New World Order religion on and off down through the centuries. When Moshiach came, it was basically the Roman Empire, and down through the centuries since then, to this very day, we're dealing with a one world religious system that is trying to crush the truth of the gospel. And all of this is wrapped up in the image of the bow and arrow and the hunter. And again, I'm not saying that if you're a hunter, you're sinning, or if you like to do archery, that you're in danger of hellfire. No, Yah forbid, I'm not any of that. It's just within the Bible, there's this thematic thing we need to look at. All that being said, the whole thing of the blind bowman and the idea that he's just randomly firing out, love is mysterious. I will grant you that. And sometimes we wonder, well, sometimes you'll look at a couple, and you'll think, how on earth did these two people come together? Sometimes it just seems natural, at the archetypal thing of the football quarterback and the head cheerleader, which is sort of a cliche. But on the other hand, you sometimes see these couples that you think maybe they're just some dude up in the sky firing arrows off at random, and whoever they hit, they fall in love. No, that's a totally foreign idea to the scriptures and to the Judeo-Christian understanding of love and marriage. Because love, I shouldn't have to tell you this, but love and marriage are two of the most sacred cornerstones of biblical life. And this, the idea that you're just somehow randomly brought together with this girl or with this guy, no, that is not true unless you're totally, and I admit 90% of the world is doing this. They're just wandering around totally outside of the will of Elohim, basically being guided by their lusts and their passions. And of course, most of them don't even care if they're committing fornication or even adultery, because we've gotten so far away from the world system. But what I want people to understand is the idea of falling in love is very sacred. The idea of marriage is even more so. And the thing you need to bear in mind, brothers and sisters, is that true love, the kind of love that you can really build a marriage on, does not originate in your lower regions. It originates in a set-apart, kadosh, heart and soul that has been given over to Elohim, and not just superficially. And I know this can be a tall order, especially for younger people, because, most people get married in their early 20s or so, and it can be a challenge. But what I want people to understand is you need to walk in the footsteps of Yeshua. You need to seek him. And I know there are people watching this that are trying to find a husband or a wife, and bless you. And my prayer is that you do find that individual, because it is such a great blessing. I know my marriage to Mary has been an extraordinary blessing for me and for the ministry. But that being said, you need to just walk as closely to Yeshua as possible. Ask for his mind. Paul says we have the mind of Moshiach. Ask for his counsel. Ask for his leading. And this is something I learned from Mary. She said she was praying for her husband, not in the sense of give me a husband, but in the sense of interceding for him before she even knew who he would be. Do that, because that's the way to put the two of you together. And again, it's somewhat of a cliche, but it's true. If you look at the essence of the biblical view of dating and marriage, you don't want to find the right person. You want to be the right person. And that right person is someone who is walking closely in Moshiach and in Torah. And if you walk that way and act that way, then whether you're a woman or a man, you're going to attract the person that the Almighty has for you. So, again, I guess what I'm saying is throw aside the things of the world, and Valentine's Day is one of the things of the world. Get rid of it. Don't do it. If you want to give your wife candy, great. If you want to send her flowers, great. Just surprise her. Surprise her with it. Don't make it just, it's her anniversary, it's her birthday, whatever. All of those are nice too, but, randomly give her gifts. Randomly show her how precious she is in your life. And this should go without saying, but I'm just bringing this to a close. And I just want to say, forsake the things of the world, like Jeremiah says, regard not the ways of the heathen, because this is definitely a heathen festival. And if you keep it, if you practice the accoutrements of it, it might very well open up doorways into your life, the life of your family, including your children. And right now our children are being bombarded, unless you keep them totally away from television and media, and unless you completely, homeschool them, they're going to be exposed to all kinds of hypersexualized material at a very young age. So you don't want to add the spiritual toxin of Valentine's Day into their precious little pure hearts. You don't want to add it to your family, to your wife or your husband either. So that's basically, what I want to tell you about the Valentine's Day thing. Stay away from the arrows of the blind bowman, and instead follow the Ruach HaKodesh and pray for the Almighty to send you your intended, if he has not already done so. So, thank you very much for listening. I pray this has been a blessing to you. Share this video, and if you're not subscribed, please do so. And I would also ask that you would pray about supporting the work of our ministry. We do have on our website ways to do that, but also we do have text to give now, and the number is down below here where you can use your smartphone to send us money directly. So again, thank you for listening. We pray you have a blessed week in Moshiach, one that is not involving, Cupid or Eros, and we pray his richest blessings upon you. Shalom, shalom.